Right now, as you watch this, California's entire coastline is under siege. 40-foot monster waves are devouring homes, collapsing piers, and forcing 10,000 people to flee their communities. But here's what terrifies scientists most. This isn't a freak storm. This is the new reality. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why rebuilding, as we always have, is no longer possible. The question isn't if more will be lost. It's how much of California's coast will survive what's coming next. The numbers are staggering. Over $500 million in damage and climbing. 100 water rescues in a single week. 20 counties declaring emergencies simultaneously. But these statistics only tell part of the story of what's happening to California right now. On December 28th, something unprecedented began. Monster waves, some reaching 40 feet in height, started hammering California's entire 1,100-mile coastline. Within 48 hours, the Ventura Pier collapsed on live television. Coastal highways vanished beneath churning foam. Entire neighborhoods in Pacifica became islands surrounded by raging seawater. Watched my neighbor's deck get swept away by a 30-foot wave in Pacifica, posted one resident on social media. We're packing to leave. Nowhere feels safe. This wasn't hyperbole. This was survival. The National Weather Service issued hazard statements for every major beach city from Mendocino to San Diego. Governor Newsom declared a state emergency on December 30th. The National Guard mobilized for mass evacuations. FEMA deployed assessment teams and approved $10 million in emergency grants before the waves even peaked. But here's what makes this crisis unlike anything California has faced before. It's not just the waves, it's the perfect storm of multiple disasters converging at once. King tides surging 2.5 feet above normal levels. Coastal land sinking up to 2 inches annually from subsidence. Back-to-back Pacific storms creating conditions that completely overwhelm existing coastal defenses. 10.5 million residents in coastal counties now face a terrifying reality. The ocean isn't just angry. It's permanently changed the rules of coastal survival. Traditional risk assessments, obsolete, historical flood zones, meaningless. The infrastructure designed to protect these communities, utterly inadequate for what scientists say is only the beginning. What you're witnessing isn't just big waves, it's physics unleashing oceanic fury in ways that defy traditional understanding. When scientists measure wave intervals stretching 20 seconds, they're documenting something terrifying. That interval means each wave has gathered energy across thousands of miles of open Pacific Ocean before slamming into California with the force of a freight train. The mechanics are brutal. These aren't ordinary storm waves. They're the product of multiple powerful Pacific storm systems moving in rapid succession, each one feeding energy into the next. As these storms track eastward, they generate swells that travel at highway speeds across the Pacific, building power with every mile. Then comes the amplification effect. California's sea levels are already 6 to 8 inches higher than they were in 1980. That might sound insignificant, but in coastal physics, every inch matters exponentially. Higher baseline water levels mean storm surges penetrate farther inland. Waves break with more force, and coastal defenses face pressures they were never designed to handle. The subsidence factor makes everything worse. Land along California's coast is sinking at rates of 1 to 2 inches per year in vulnerable regions. This isn't just ground settling, it's geological surrender. As the land drops, relative sea level rise accelerates dramatically. Areas that seemed safe 5 years ago now flood regularly. But the most terrifying element? The compound effect scientists call bathtub drainage in reverse. Rising groundwater pushed up by rising seas is creating flooding from below while monster waves attack from above. Dr. Lara Cushing from UCLA warns flooding from sea level rise is dangerous on its own. But when facilities with hazardous materials are in the path of those floodwaters, the danger multiplies. Think about this question. What happens when the laws of physics that protected California's coast for generations no longer apply? The answer is unfolding right now, and it's worse than anyone predicted. Stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal about who's truly at risk will shake you to your core. Behind every statistic is a human story of loss, terror, and survival. Barely made it out of my beachfront rental in Santa Cruz before the water came through the windows, posted one survivor. Lost everything. This isn't dramatic exaggeration. This is the new reality for thousands of Californians. At least 3 people have died from drownings and wave impacts in Santa Cruz and Ventura counties alone. Over 20 injuries from debris and flooding incidents, but the psychological trauma runs deeper. Children in coastal communities are now afraid to sleep near windows facing the ocean. Parents are making impossible decisions: stay and risk their families, or abandon everything they've built. The pier is underwater, one Santa Cruz resident shared. "I've never seen anything like this. It's like the sea is reclaiming the town." These aren't just property losses, these are community anchors, cultural landmarks, and economic lifelines being devoured by forces beyond human control. The displacement numbers tell a story of mass disruption. 10,000 residents evacuated from low-lying coastal areas. Emergency shelters established in 15 communities. Families separated as some members refuse to leave while others flee for safety. "My kids are scared to sleep near the windows," posted a mother from Pacifica. "I've lived here 20 years, and I've never seen waves like this." The most heartbreaking stories come from business owners whose life's work disappeared in hours. "My restaurant in Pacifica is underwater," one owner shared. "Years of work gone in a day. How do you recover from this?" The answer, according to scientists, is increasingly clear. You don't recover. You adapt or you retreat. The scientific community's warnings carry the weight of undeniable data and mounting dread. "This is a wake-up call for California," Governor Newsom declared. "We cannot keep rebuilding in the same way. Adaptation is our only path forward." Dr. Emily Carter from the United States Geological Survey doesn't mince words. Coastal subsidence is accelerating erosion at an alarming rate. Some areas are losing ground faster than we can measure. When scientists admit their measurement capabilities can't keep pace with destruction, you know the situation has crossed into uncharted territory. National Weather Service meteorologists describe conditions they've never documented before. These monster waves are a direct result of powerful Pacific storms colliding with high tides. We expect more through the weekend. But it's the long-term projections that should terrify every coastal resident. Sean Vitusek from the USGS puts California's identity at stake. Beaches are perhaps the most iconic feature of California, and the potential for losing this identity is real. We're not talking about minor erosion. We're talking about the fundamental character of the state disappearing beneath rising waters. Ben Hamilton from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory connects the dots. As much as anywhere, here on the West Coast, our sea level rise is very closely attached to global warming. This isn't a temporary weather event. This is the new baseline, and it's accelerating. Climate expert Dr. Michael Lopez delivers the verdict that changes everything. This isn't just a storm, it's a preview of our future with rising seas. Retreat from the coast may be inevitable for some communities. The pattern emerging from this crisis reveals why traditional disaster response is failing. This isn't a single event with a clear beginning and end. It's the start of a cascading system failure that will only accelerate. California's coast is losing beaches at an unprecedented rate. Current projections show 25 to 70% of the state's beaches could disappear by the end of this century. But these monster waves are accelerating that timeline dramatically. Coastal cliffs are retreating 10 feet in a single week, rates that would normally take decades. The economic implications are staggering. $15 billion worth of property faces risk from just 1 foot of sea level rise. But sea levels are rising at 3.4 millimeters annually and accelerating. The compound effect means today's safe properties become tomorrow's disaster zones. Southern California faces particular vulnerability. A USC study predicts a 5-fold increase in coastal living costs by 2050 as communities struggle with repeated flooding, infrastructure failure, and insurance crises. Rising groundwater threatens an additional 350,000 people and $100 billion in properties previously considered safe from coastal flooding. The storm succession pattern suggests this crisis will intensify. Back-to-back Pacific storm fronts are arriving in rapid succession, with additional storms forecast through January 7th. Each storm builds upon the damage from the previous one, creating cumulative destruction that exceeds the sum of individual events. Therefore, what we're witnessing isn't recovery followed by normalcy. It's escalation toward a new equilibrium where today's extreme becomes tomorrow's routine. The question isn't whether this will get worse, it's how quickly communities will be forced to make the ultimate choice between adaptation and retreat. Stay with me, because the historical precedent I'm about to reveal shows this isn't California's first coastal catastrophe, but it might be its most decisive. History provides a chilling preview of California's current crisis. The Great Storm of 1861 to 1862 brought weeks of intense storms, causing widespread flooding that reshaped entire valleys. But even that pales compared to what's happening now. The Great Storm of '88 in January 1988 produced the largest waves ever measured in the Southern California Bight. The 1982 to 83 El Niño events caused over $100 million in damages when adjusted for inflation. The 1997 to 98 El Niño brought significant coastal damage statewide. But here's the crucial difference. Those were isolated events striking a coastline with natural defenses. Since 1900, California has lost 25% of its natural coastal barriers. Development has pushed critical infrastructure into flood-prone areas that were once protected by dunes, wetlands, and natural buffer zones. The current crisis combines the worst elements of all previous disasters, while striking a coastline more vulnerable than ever before. Unlike historical storms that communities could weather and rebuild from, these conditions represent a permanent shift in coastal physics that makes traditional recovery impossible. Right now, as emergency crews conduct their 101st water rescue, the threat level continues escalating beyond manageable limits. High surf warnings remain extended through January 6th, with additional storms tracking toward California through January 7th. The National Weather Service has issued hazard statements for every major beach city along the 1,100-mile coastline. But these warnings capture only part of the danger. Deceptive calm periods between wave sets provide false security before massive surges arrive with devastating force. The highest water we've seen this winter, faster, more forceful, and far more unpredictable than anything forecasted, reports a Santa Cruz city official. When local authorities admit conditions exceed their forecasting capabilities, residents face impossible decisions with inadequate information. Emergency fencing now blocks access to entire beach systems. Harbor facilities report catastrophic damage. Over 50 miles of coastal highways remain closed. The infrastructure that connects coastal communities to the outside world is systematically failing. But here's what makes the current situation uniquely dangerous. Multiple threat systems are converging simultaneously. Storm surges, king tides, coastal subsidence, and infrastructure failure could create compound hazards that overwhelm traditional emergency response capabilities. What happens when the systems designed to protect communities become part of the threat? That's the question facing every coastal California resident today. The scenarios unfolding over the coming weeks will determine the future of California's coastline for generations. Additional Pacific storms are forecast through January 7th, each one capable of inflicting damage comparable to what we've already witnessed. But the real threat lies in the compound effects these repeated impacts will create. Weakened seawalls face additional battering. Compromised coastal cliffs become increasingly unstable. Saturated ground loses its ability to absorb future flooding. Each storm doesn't just cause new damage, it amplifies the vulnerability to every storm that follows. The mega landslide risk represents the ultimate nightmare scenario. Coastal instability could trigger near-field tsunamis with waves arriving within minutes of the initial collapse. These aren't theoretical possibilities. They're documented geological hazards that become more likely as coastal erosion accelerates. Sea level rise projections show California facing 10 to 12 inches of rise by 2050, with some areas experiencing 1.6 to 3.1 feet by 2100. But these projections assume gradual change. The current crisis suggests the timeline could compress dramatically as feedback loops accelerate the process. Economic collapse of coastal communities becomes increasingly likely. Insurance companies are already retreating from high-risk areas. Property values in vulnerable zones face inevitable decline. Tourism, the economic backbone of many coastal communities, suffers long-term damage as beaches disappear and infrastructure fails. The managed retreat scenario, once considered a distant possibility, now appears inevitable for some communities. The question isn't whether retreat will happen, but which communities will make planned strategic withdrawals versus which will face chaotic abandonment as conditions become uninhabitable. Even as emergency crews work around the clock and communities begin damage assessment, the fundamental threat remains unresolved and growing. William O'Reilly from Scripps Institution captures the uncertainty. The deck is being reshuffled and redistributed a bit along the California coastline, and we don't yet fully understand what's driving that reshuffling. This admission from leading scientists reveals the terrifying truth. We're witnessing changes so rapid and complex that our understanding can't keep pace. Traditional risk models built on historical patterns become useless when the underlying conditions change faster than we can measure. The acceleration of coastal subsidence means some areas are sinking faster than scientists can track. Rising groundwater creates flooding from below, while storm surges attack from above. The compound effects create new types of disasters that existing emergency systems weren't designed to handle. Climate feedback loops suggest conditions will continue worsening. Warmer oceans fuel stronger storms. Higher sea levels amplify every surge. Weakened coastal defenses provide less protection with each successive impact. The system is locked into a cycle of escalating destruction with no natural stopping point. But perhaps most unsettling is the psychological impact on coastal communities. When the fundamental assumptions about safety and permanence prove false, how do people rebuild their lives? How do communities maintain identity when their defining features disappear beneath the waves? The monster waves battering California's coast aren't just reshaping geography, they're forcing a complete reimagining of what it means to live at the edge of the continent. California's coastline crisis isn't ending, it's escalating. The monster waves may subside temporarily, but the forces driving this destruction grow stronger every day. As communities face the choice between adaptation and retreat, one question haunts every decision. What happens when the ocean refuses to respect the boundaries we've drawn? Stay informed, stay prepared, and remember, this is just the beginning.